His Excellency Mr. Enam Mayara, Speaker of House of Councillors of the United Kingdom of Morocco, Excellencies Speakers of Member Councils present, Excellencies Heads and Members of all delegations, Members of the press present, receive warm compliments from the people of Kenya, and particularly from the Speaker of the Senate of Kenya, on whose behalf I stand before you. The relationship between Kenya and the Arab nation is older than 1,000 years. It left us with cities like Mombasa, cities like Zanzibar. It left us with a rich culture. It left us with a language that we proudly call the Swahili language that is spoken by almost half of Africans today. I want to congratulate the founding fathers of ASECA, who 20 years ago felt it wise for us to have an association for parliamentary cooperation between the two regions. Madam Chair, 20 years ago, Kenya did not have a Senate, and that is probably why Kenya was not among the founding members of ASECA. But I want to provide the commitment of the Kenyan Senate that Kenya will be a member of ASECA henceforth. Madam Chair, 20 years ago, there was a lot of optimism following the winds of change, following the structural adjustment programs in Africa and Latin America, that in 20 years' time, Africa and the Arab nation and Latin America would be industrialized, our people would be prosperous, our economies would be integrated, our infrastructure would be world-class, and immigration would no longer be a problem. Madam Chair, 20 years later, when we reflect, we have achieved a lot in terms of sovereignty. We have achieved a lot in terms of lifting our people out of abject poverty. Today, as we meet as senates, shuras, and other legislatures from Africa, Arab, Latin America, and the Caribbean, I want us to reflect on the role of parliamentary diplomacy, not just on South-South cooperation, but on the role of parliamentary diplomacy in ensuring that this region that contributes immensely to the global economy has its rightful place. Madam Chair, the reality of COVID has shed light on the selfishness of the global world order. When COVID struck Africa, Arab, Latin America, and Caribbean regions, we were left on our own. While other regions stockpiled vaccines, we were left to God. And indeed, God has been kind to us. Let us wipe out the selfishness of the global world order and usher in a new era of selflessness built on the solidarity of African, Arab, Caribbean, and Latin nations. Madam Chair, it is my view that the COVID pandemic is not the last pandemic. We must prepare ourselves for further pandemics in future. Let us not be caught flat-footed as the COVID pandemic caught us. In terms of parliamentary diplomacy, Madam Chair, I believe that through policy, through legislation and advocacy, which is a role of senates and shuras across the world, we could enhance further integration of the various blocs. Madam Chair, it is a sad thing when we see our people line up to get visas, sometimes moving from one African country to the next neighboring African country is more difficult than moving from an African country to a European or to an American country. Madam Chair, when it comes to COVID restrictions and COVID protocols, members of the blocs that are meeting today have put extremely high hurdles, extremely high obstacles to each other. Let us stem the flow of immigrants within these regions. Let nobody be called an immigrant. Let us look at each other as brothers and sisters. Madam Chair, many of the delegates present today perhaps left their countries in Africa, had to transit in Europe before coming back to Casablanca. As legislators in charge of policy, as legislators in charge of advocacy, why do we make it so difficult for brother country to visit each other? Let the resolution from today make it clear that South-South cooperation is not just about lofty economic models and speeches, but practical action to make it easy for a Kenyan to travel to Chile, practical action to make it easy for a Kenyan to come to Casablanca and make the journey shorter than the journey to Heathrow in London. Madam Chair, women and youth was a conversation that we had yesterday. As a bloc, we must mainstream gender and we must see more of youthful faces in our meetings. Women and youth don't need favors. What they need is opportunity. What they need is an education system that puts them at the center. They do not need equality, they need equity. Because women and youth, given the same opportunities that men have, but also take into account historical injustices, we will be able to grow a region that is more compassionate when our women are on the table. As I conclude, Madam Chair, many of the members of OPEC are also members of the bloc that is represented here today. Have we asked ourselves whether oil will continue to be the wealth of the world? Data is going to be the wealth of the future. Data is going to be the oil of the future. What have we done in terms of infrastructure to build our own digital networks, to build our own data centers, to build our own African, Arab, Latin, and Caribbean clouds? Where does our data sit? Who owns that data? And what are they doing with it? Let us prepare ourselves for the digital economy. Finally, let us, as a region, make a commitment to silence the guns. That was a resolution of the African Union. Unfortunately, every other night we can still hear the guns sounding, not just in Ukraine and Russia, but the guns are sounding in our regions, in Yemen, in Syria, in various countries in Africa, in various countries in the Caribbean. Madam Chair, Kenya has a unique political culture. Today, you find the president endorsing the head of opposition to run the country. I do not believe that there is one version of democracy or one version of governance that we should impose on the members of this bloc. Each sovereign nation has its own way of running things and doing things. We must encourage each other to adopt traditional and homegrown dispute resolution mechanism and homegrown political structures to ensure that the guns are forever silent in the Arab, in Africa, in Caribbean, and Latin America regions. Madam Chair, long live Aseka, long live His Majesty the King Mohammed VI. May God assist him. Thank you.
Merci, chers collègues, pour cette